Good evening all, and thank you for tuning in to tonight's story. If you enjoy it, please remember to subscribe and like the video so we can continue bringing you more horror stories. Now, without further ado, take a deep breath and relax as we take a journey through the night. I was about 4 or 5 years old and my parents had just separated. My mom was living in a 2-bedroom apartment. I had my own room, but I preferred to sleep in her bed whenever I was staying with her. Our 2 bedrooms were at the end of a hallway, directly across from each other. Our apartment was on the first floor, and I remember that it was in the middle of the summer, and my mom had a window open her room, which was directly behind the bed, above the headboard. Anyways, I woke up in the middle of the night and remember sitting up and seeing that our cat was sitting in the door frame of my mom's room. Her door was open and you could partially see into my bedroom. This was strange because our cat was typically always in bed with us. As I was watching him, he walked into my bedroom and meowed. I turned to face my mom and wake her up. In the 3-4 seconds it took her to wake up and ask me what was wrong. We both looked back up in the door frame, and there was a man standing by my open door, making his way out of my bedroom. I still don't know how she managed to do it so quickly, but my mother proceeded to pick me up and literally throw me out of the screen window. Again, we were on the first floor, and it was maybe a 3-foot drop to the ground. She quickly followed and we were able to start screaming for help, and someone called 911. The police came but didn't see any signs of forced entry, only that our front door was unlocked, which led them to believe the man must have exited that way. The strange thing was that my mom swore up and down that she had locked the door that night with the deadbolt and chain lock. About a week later, she was cleaning the kitchen and opened up our water heater closet and found a notebook with names and drawings, as well as a pair of gloves and some gum wrappers. The police were called again, but all they could do was speculate that the man had been in our house and hid until we were asleep. About 4 years ago, I was ending my freshman year at college. I had lived in the dorms with a kick-ass roommate and pretty much had a great experience altogether. Towards the end of my last semester, something seemed different in my hall of the dorms. We were all still our lively selves, but just walking into the dorms would give you this massive feeling of dread. We all wrote it off as the stress of finals approaching, but it just felt off. Well, one night after studying, I decided to hit the shower so I can just wake up and make my way to class in a few hours. Before I keep going, I should go ahead and set the layout of our hall in the bathroom. Our hall was one of many halls on a single floor. Each hall had 4 rooms that accommodated 2 people each, or a single room for the RAs. The entrance to the halls were massive steel doors with a small window located at one end, and across from it was the bathroom. It seriously felt like a prison block rather than a living quarter for college students. As for the bathroom itself, when you walked in, you were immediately met with 2 sets of sinks, 2 sinks aside, on your left and right, with massive mirrors facing each other and creating that infinite loop of mirrors. Then past that you had your 2 urinals and a toilet stall on your left and 2 showers on your right. When facing the left set of sinks, you can clearly see into the showers from the mirror if the door's open. And in the right set of sinks, you can see the reflection of the shower. The door of the bathroom was identical to the entrance to the hall, a massive steel frame with a small window that didn't allow for much of a view, with good reason. The door was propped open with a giant wooden wedge that couldn't be moved unless you were really trying to close that door. So back to the story. I'm all alone in the bathroom gearing up to go shower. I throw my change of clothes on the right side sink so that way I can reach around the stall and grab them. Once I set my stuff down, I happen to look up into the mirror and I can see in the distance something almost shimmering inside the shower stall. As I look at it, I notice that it slowly gets closer, like it's jumping from the furthermost layer to the next layer closer. I'm kind of unsettled, but I don't think much of it other than me coming down off of a massive Red Bull, Adderall, and caffeine kick. But it starts transitioning faster as it gets closer. I can start making out details, but nothing vivid or striking. It's just a dark mass that looks like it's covered in hair. At this point, I'm freaking out hardcore since this thing is getting closer in the mirror, and I'm pretty much frozen to this one spot. As it gets to the fourth layer, I get the closest look at this thing I'll ever get, and I regret every minute of it. It wasn't hair, but some kind of long, flowing veil. You could see through it partially, but from the torso down, it was just solid black. And the face, I can't describe it. It was clearly human, but at the same time, it was so far removed. There were eyes, they were black, but definitely glowing somehow. I only saw this for maybe a second at the most, but it's burned into my mind forever. Then the lights cut out and I hear the door slam. It's pitch black in the bathroom, so I can't see this thing anymore. I go to open the door, but it won't budge. And then this intense smell of blood hits me out of nowhere, and that's all I remember. I woke up later in the hospital from what my RA claims he was on his way to go use the bathroom sometime after this happened, where he found me in the shower stall with my shirt covered in blood from a massive nosebleed. He tried asking me what happened, and according to him, all I could respond with was, "It saw me," and I start freaking out. So he calls an ambulance and they get me to the hospital. All the while, I'm apparently freaking out, so they sedate me to get me to calm down. I'm coming to around the time my parents show up, worried sick, of course. I asked them what happened, and according to the doctors, they believe I had a seizure. However, they ran CAT scans soon after I was cooperative enough to do so and found no sign of any seizure occurring. Not to mention, epilepsy doesn't run in my family at all, and having taken Adderall countless times in the past, and since then, I've never had a similar side effect, neither hallucinations or potential seizures. To this day, I still can't bring myself to look into a mirror for more than a minute, and just being stuck in a room with one for an extended period will just cause me to break down. I've been to therapy going on 3 years because of this, and I've talked to countless religious leaders who, besides giving me the general, "Well, you should turn to God in times like these" talks, don't recognize that kind of pattern as anything demonic or evil. And the strangest thing is that before that incident, there were no actual claims of activity in those dorms, and since I left, there hasn't been any either. It was just that one isolated incident. When I was about 8 to 9, we lived in a house that my father built for us in the middle of nowhere, Indiana. My parents owned a small business that often brought clients to our remote little homestead, and over the years we met some rather odd people. One such person was a strange man that gave me the heebie-jeebies as soon as I saw him. He arrived at our home in a black car with tinted windows, wearing all black, with a black hat and dark sunglasses. His demeanor was very strange, and he was very interested in our black Persian cat named Mercedes. Nevertheless, he left after his consultation with my parents, but later at dinner, everyone admitted that he set them on edge. That night, Mercedes came down very ill. A few days later, after an illness, the local vet couldn't diagnose that included the cat vomiting up gobs of what appeared to be black tar. Mercedes died. In her final moments, she would swat and hiss at something in the air. I'll never forget the chill I got when she took her last breath. After this, many strange things began happening around our home. We'd find footprints in the show that started and stopped out of nowhere. Noises in the middle of the night. The wallpaper would be torn halfway off the walls. My mother, who has always been somewhat of a sensitive person, claimed to start seeing demonic creatures around the house and became rather withdrawn. I had asthma, but had been a long while without an attack. Soon after all of this began happening, I started having episodes again. I was very sick one night, so I slept on the floor next to my mother's side of the bed in my parents' bedroom. Under their bed and around there were a bunch of boxes, family photos, wrapping paper, etc. Things that we'd been meaning to store elsewhere. In the middle of the night, I had a particularly bad asthma attack. I heard my mother wake up screaming, "Get away from her!" and trying to get to me. Every box from under the bed and around the room had been stacked between where I lay on the floor and my mother's side of the bed, preventing her from getting to me. She finally reached me and gave me my inhaler, and she cried all night. She never told me what she saw that night, but strange things continued to happen for several more months. We had the house blessed and tried everything we could. Eventually, the activity started to slow. My brother and his family live in the house now, and they hear unexplainable sounds every so often, but nothing like what happened that winter. I grew up to be quite a skeptic, but I still can't explain what happened that year. I just tell myself it was all in our heads. When I was a kid, the thing I hated to do the most was take my clothes downstairs to the basement and place them in a big pile next to the laundry machine so that my mom would wash them. That side of the basement was not finished, and it freaking terrified me. I had so many nightmares about the place, like crazy reoccurring nightmares that I would realize when they were happening, but I was unable to escape them. One of the nightmares was that I would be up and around the house with no one else at home, and then I would become aware that it was approaching the time. I don't know what time it was, but I could feel it in my bones that bad things were about to happen. So I would get under the kitchen table. The door to the basement was in the kitchen, and then the basement door would open, and I could see the legs of some man. I never knew who it was, and never saw his face. But I knew that if this creature caught me out in the open, it would do terrible things to me. The worst thing was the thought that it knew I was under the table, but it enjoyed the fact that I was so afraid, hiding under there trying not to be seen or heard. Sometimes, either at the end of an unrelated dream or on its own, I'd be walking down the stairs into the basement, and when I stepped off the last step, I was plunged into total darkness, and something would grab me. I can't explain the terror this produced in me, and the fact that I knew at the top of the stairs what was about to happen, and I could not stop walking. There were other crazy dreams like that, all taking place in the basement or about the basement. I hated the basement. One day when I had to take my laundry down, I was home alone except for my dog. So I decide it'll be better to have her down there with me than have to go by myself. I grab my laundry, call the dog, and head down the stairs. It's daylight. Light is streaming down the stairs and into the basement through these small slit windows, and nothing is all that terrifying. I saunter over to the machine, casually toss my clothes onto the pile, and start to make my way back up the stairs. Previous boldness aside, I always run up the stairs because I hate the basement. I was a scrawny kid, so you could barely hear my feet tapping up the stairs. Suddenly, all I can hear is this insane thudding and scrambling, coming up the stairs behind me. My brain almost literally shut down. I screamed with terror. I felt my heart pounding in my chest, and I couldn't even continue moving up the stairs. I simply fell onto the stairs and curled up into a ball. Can you even imagine growing up and being told monsters aren't real, and then facing the moment where your worst nightmare is about to murder you in your own home? I just shut my eyes as tight as I could and waited to die. Then my dog started licking my face, excited to be playing a fun new game called Race You Up the Stairs. A week after gaining my CPR certification, I had to try and perform CPR on a woman dying of a heroin, probably other drugs too, overdose. I was at a thrift store with some friends looking for Halloween costumes, and someone came in saying that someone was passed out in the parking lot. I was in the dressing room, and it just got super quiet, so I came out and told them I was certified, and I'd go take a look, and that they needed to call 911. I go outside and don't see anyone on the ground. Someone comes out and shouts that the person is in the car that's parked far out by itself. I ran over and honestly freaked the fuck out. She was pretty much already dead, completely blue in the face, slumped against her car window. She had the red druggie rings around her eyes, but those were blue too because she was so oxygen deprived. We opened the door, and I'll never forget that when we turned her head to see if she still had a pulse, she had tears running down her face. We pulled her out of the car, put her on the ground, and took her pulse again because the first person to do it wasn't sure. We started CPR, and the ambulance arrived about a minute after. They got her strapped up and in and continued CPR. They had another ambulance come, and those EMTs got out, and there was literally like 6 of them surrounding her. The cop told us they had administered some type of drug that can apparently reverse heroin overdoses if given in time, but she was pretty much dead already. They would do the necessary stuff until they could get to the hospital and call it, according to him. I also remember when we opened the door, there was heroin needles and empty pill bottles all over the floor. She wasn't very old. We also think she had kids. She had some toys and a car seat, plus 2 names tattooed on her. Every time I stay at my grandma's house, I hear someone walking upstairs. It starts at one side of the room, casually walks to the other and stops. This will happen maybe twice a night. I didn't start hearing it until I was about 14, when my grandparents made me start sleeping in a different room on the first floor because they starting sleeping in separate bedrooms. Blah, blah, blah. Regardless, both of their rooms are also on the first floor. For a little backstory, I have always been afraid of the upstairs at their house. I don't know why, but it's always freaked me out, and I refuse to ever go up there alone. I'm 23 now, still won't go up alone. There's one room specifically, though. It's a long, narrow bedroom. When you open the door, there are closets on your left and right, a bed placed roughly in the middle of the room, and a window on the far side opposite the door. I was told growing up by my grandparents that the sons of the previous owner claimed to see a gorilla come out of the closet at night, dance around the room, and go back into the closet. I thought nothing of this story until I had to start sleeping in the other room. The room located directly below the scary room upstairs. So we all go to bed. All the lights in the house are off, and I'm still awake, lying on the bed. Then I heard it. Thump, thump, thump. Starting at one end of the room upstairs, it got closer to me, passed right above me, and continued to the end of the room where it stopped. I'm wide awake, terrified out of my mind. It was no question to me that I had heard footsteps. I knew that slow, casual pace. I was freaked out and went to my grandpa's room. I told him what I heard. He told me that the house is old and it creaks, but he turned the dining room light on for me, so I felt a little safer. I tried going back to sleep. Then it started again, this time from where it ended the first time, by the window upstairs. It walks over me again and stops when it reached the door. I thought it was over until 5 seconds later when I heard it coming down the stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Silence as it reached the landing. Then 6, 7, 8, 9, the 10, and silence again as it reached the first floor. I was frozen in shock. Whatever it was on my floor of the house, and sadly unaffected by the dining room light. I was staring at the doorway to my room. The dining room light was shining in, and my vision began to distort. I felt dizzy with fear, so I pulled the blankets over my head and suddenly heard a scratching sound from inside my room. I knew exactly where it was coming from, too. My grandpa's gun case. It was a very obvious sound, scratching on the wood. Long scratches down the front of the gun case door. I could even hear the door ever so slightly tapping against the frame as each scratch began. I tried to scream and I couldn't. I took a second to take a deep breath and let out a loud scream. In seconds, my grandpa had made it to my room and I was relieved. Needless to say, he still didn't believe me. So I did what any normal person would do. I draped a sheet over the side of the bed and slept underneath it. I wrapped myself tight in a comforter, put on headphones, and turned my back to the door. There could be a party of ghosts in my room and I wouldn't even know. The next morning, my grandpa told my grandma about what happened the night before. She said, "Oh, that's silly. You know your cousin woke me up the last time she stayed here. She came in my room saying, 'I hear footsteps.'" I slept under the bed for the rest of my week stay with them. I've stayed there countless times since that happened, and I hear the footsteps every time. I sleep on top of the bed now, but keep my back to the door and sleep with headphones on. I haven't heard it come down the stairs since that first night, but if it does, I don't want to know. I have had several dreams similar to what I am posting. I've been a caver in Florida for about 13 years, since I was about 6, and have been to a lot of caves. Never been afraid before this to go in one. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, I started having this reoccurring dream. I would have it at least twice a year, always the same, even though I would realize I was dreaming after the first few iterations. I would fall asleep and dream of being in a cave and going into this little hole in the bottom. Inside, I would see a 10 to 15 foot long corridor about 2 to 4 feet high. At the end, it would always turn left, and I always saw a bent red stop sign at the end, like someone ripped off the top 2 feet and tossed it in. But I would always follow the corridor. I would turn and walk past the sign despite being scared, despite many times knowing what was there, and the corridor would start descending, quickly opening up into a large vertical chamber with the path leading down in a corkscrew. Everything became blurry at this point, but it was always the same. I saw trash scattered on the walls. I saw the pit leading down to a curved floor. I saw things undefined, animals or people or something else at the bottom. And I saw my family, each with one of the things, being tortured and killed every time, and I could never do anything. After I saw that, I would be stuck for a few seconds until I felt more than saw everything turn and look at me, and I would wake up. Not like a normal dream where you just drift to consciousness, or a nightmare where you bolt up in fear, but like something pushed me out, like I wasn't supposed to be there. So I have this dream multiple times a year until I turn 15. I did tell a friend about the dream before what happens next. My father decided to take us to some caves we never had been before, one of which was Dog Drop. It was likely named so because someone either threw their pet in there or a coyote fell in and the body was later discovered. Dog Drop had a roughly 30-foot rappel straight down to enter. I went down with my brother while my father waited up at the top. There was a hole in the ground. I started to feel uneasy, though I didn't know why. So I followed my brother into the hole. I felt worse as I moved down. And when I looked up, I saw the same corridor, the same turn, the same wall, the same bottles at the corner. And I instantly was hit with this overwhelming sense of nausea and fear and being watched, and everything was screaming at me to leave. I froze and must have made some noise because my brother turned around and asked what was wrong. I managed to say I wanted to leave now and climbed out as quickly as I could, followed immediately by my brother. We packed up and left, never have gone back and never will. Haven't told anyone what actually happened, just said I wasn't feeling well, and they forgot pretty quickly. The thing that really makes it creepy for me is I have never had the dream again. Year after year, I would have it consistently, but it just stopped after that. But I still remember it all. And I still feel afraid, almost an external fear when I think of it. My wife and I stayed at a nice hotel in downtown Pittsburgh. It was where I asked her to marry me after a lavish meal. I picked the room because it came with a huge Japanese soaking tub that me, a 6'1" man, could barely see over the edge of. Anyway, the first night we stayed there, we were sleeping in the single king bed. I believe the alarm clock said it was 2 or 3 a.m. To my left, and just a few feet from me, I heard the sound of what seemed like a pencil slowly rolling down a sloped surface. It was so deliberate and loud that it woke us both up. It was also so deliberate that, while my heart thumped in my chest from the sudden noise, I quickly convinced myself that it was a pencil sliding off the desk in our room, and I went back to sleep. The next morning, to my surprise, I found that A, there were no pencils in the room, and B, there was no desk. It was my first night in the room, so I assumed that it, like other hotels, had a place to sit and write. Well, that was not the case. The only thing I could find to write with were ballpoint pens with their caps on. They wouldn't make that distinctive loud noise that a ridged wooden pencil makes as it rolls. Furthermore, there was no sloped surface in the room for anything to suddenly roll off of in the middle of the night, morning. The whole thing was weird enough for us to talk about it that morning. I do not believe in ghosts, but to be honest, I'd love to encounter something unexplained. I entertained the idea of a ghost pencil, but knew in my head it had an explanation grounded in reality. But that's not all that happened. That night we were both in the soaking tub. The water was up to my chin. It was great. We were in the middle of February, a cold and miserable month in Pittsburgh. We were sloshing around in the tub having a blast, pretending we were rich. And then from the other room, we heard the buzzing of an old microphone hooked up to a PA system. Basically, that sound of feedback that precedes an announcement. The whole room filled with the buzzing sound of microphone feedback. Our hearts thumped in our chests yet again. And then we both practically jumped out of our own skins. We heard the distinctive sound of someone blowing into a microphone to test it. Whooth, whooth. You could see it in your head. It was so distinctive, just like the pencil. My heart went from thumping wildly to thrumming like a hummingbird's. Naked, I leapt from the tub and threw a towel around myself. "That was a man blowing into a microphone," I said. My wife stayed in the tub, scared and quiet. I searched our room and did not find a speaker or any kind of speaker grill embedded into a wall or the ceiling. We could not for the life of us find a potential source for the sound other than an iHome speaker that was already playing music from my iPhone. So that was our story. We still had one more night. We were exhilarated by our engagement and the ghosts that haunted the hotel. A week later, I had the thought to email the hotel. I asked them about their building. Pittsburgh is an old town, and downtown Pittsburgh is a very, very old town. They got back to me and explained, as my jaw dropped, that they used to be an old telephone factory. I don't know why I found meaning in that explanation or why it made everything click so well, but my thoughts immediately went to the sounds of a factory, the PA system, the drafting table, all relics from another time in that building's life. Alt account because this is still a story that I don't want associated with my main account. It's not as spooky as some other stories on here, I guess. But my SO and I are still a bit bewildered by it. It's been years, and we still wonder about it occasionally. There's no explanation other than some weird, supernatural connection or just a really big fucking coincidence. For about 10 years now, my Nana has been living in a nursing home. She had a stroke and mentally she is not all there. She still recognizes us when we visit and gets happy to see us, but she often talks gibberish, thinking she is in a distant memory in the past. It makes me sad because she and I always had a very close connection growing up. My parents both worked a lot, and she would stay with me. She used to know when I was lying. She could always sense when I was sick, even when she wasn't over. And she and I are eerily similar, both in personality and looks. There are pictures of her when she was 21, and it could be me in the picture. We were very close growing up, and I love her dearly. I introduced her to my now husband when we started dating in college. He is from a different country than I am, and I live in his country. So we had been dating a few years when my visa was going to expire. In order for us to live in one place, we decided to get married. However, we were still young, fresh out of university, and decided to just elope. We decided to get officially married at a courthouse while announcing our engagement and then having a wedding a few years later. Official documents and wedding ceremonies are separated in my husband's country anyways. No one knew of our plan. We were and are still stupidly in love and thrilled to have such a crazy secret between us two. In hindsight, it was stupid and no one would have judged us, especially considering we are still happily together years later, but we still decided to hide it because we were stupid kids. So we flew to visit my parents in my home country and announce our engagement, and my dad picked us up from the airport. We were chatting in the car when he tells us that my Nana was freaking out while he visited her the other day, the day we decided to elope. Why was she freaking out? She announced to my whole family that she saw in her dreams that I had eloped and was now married. They dismissed her because they didn't expect that at all. She kept insisting and was incredibly lucid about it. She raised her voice, which she hadn't done since before the stroke. My dad had mentioned because he thought it was sweet that she was so worried about this and became so lucid. My husband and I just got silent in the car and I went cold. We don't know how she knew that or if it was just coincidence, but she knew somehow. We went to visit her a few days later and she didn't remember it at all. She was thrilled we were engaged. We are happily married now and had our wedding and stuff, and no one ever found out we had eloped before the wedding day, except my Nana apparently.